Hey there, everybody. It is Joe Marin here from Mobile Cup of Joe. We do have a special show for you guys today, and there goes the Droid Turbo right now with the custom launch phrase. But today on this video here, not going to say the name of the channel because I don't want Google searches going off all day. But we do have a special roundtable for you all of the Motorola Droid Turbo right here, which, if you've been following the mobile tech market, is without a doubt the biggest phone Verizon has seen in quite some time, and is really probably one of the biggest and baddest flagships we've seen all year long. So Motorola has been killing it this year. We had the Moto X, then we got the Nexus 6, and now the Droid Turbo. So there's a lot to talk about with this phone, and we're just going to kind of do a little roundtable here. We have got Tony McAfee here from, you'll recognize him from the What's Brewing show we do. He'll be talking with us. And we also have a special guest, Aaron Traffas. I hope I'm saying your last name right. Just kind of talk about some stuff with the Droid Turbo. So we've got just kind of a short little show for you guys today, and I want to start off this by talking about something that kind of has people on two separate sides, is the actual build of the smartphone. A lot of people think this thing looks mighty ugly, and other people don't think so. So we're just going to go ahead and lead off into that. What do you guys think about the way that this phone does look?
Well, I was sure pleasantly surprised with it, after hearing some of the initial reactions by some of the folks who attended the launch event and got to play with it. Some of them weren't too terribly excited about the feel of the phone. I sure like it a lot. It's the first phone I've felt that feels really good in the hand as far as weight goes. Without a case, I sure like it and don't have any problems with the aesthetic at all.
I think my thoughts on it is it does feel good in the hand, and it actually makes you, looking at the device and holding it in your hand, makes it feel like a smaller phone than it is, because it's about the same size as the Galaxy S5, which is, I found to be a little bit needlessly large, but I don't feel that this device is needlessly large when I hold it. My thing about the aesthetic of the device, looking at it, I'm bored. I'm really bored with it, and it's not to say that I need a gold phone with diamond flakes or something. I just know that their Droid line, their Droid Mini, their Droid Max, their Droid Ultra, all of their Droid really awesome phones that they have, they all look the same, and this is no different. I mean, from the front, if you saw somebody holding this and you didn't know how big it was, it looks exactly like a Droid Mini, with the exception of probably the speaker grate and the camera placement in the top middle there. So I'm bored with it, but it's not an ugly phone like people are saying. I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, I know I got it, and I was really hoping we would get that ballistic nylon, because the phone does come in 3 different variants. We do have the black ballistic nylon, and we've got this one here, which is a DuPont Kevlar, and the DuPont comes in both a red and a black model. Then I've obviously here got the black, and I think you guys have the same models as well. And personally, I mean, the Droid line has always had kind of an industrial and nitty-gritty design with it, nothing really too exciting, but just kind of that bold, the in-your-face Droid with the, as soon as you turn a Droid phone on, you usually had that big Droid eye with that boot animation. But with the Droid Turbo, though, we actually have a very, very beautiful 3D animation with the Droid logo, and the design to me just feels a little more set back from what you're used to seeing. It seems a bit more elegant, and I'm not saying it's the most beautiful phone out there, because it's definitely far from that. But I really don't think this phone is ugly at all. I think it looks a lot better than past Droid products we've seen before. It's going to really make you go out and buy the phone. You're not going to say, oh man, this phone looks so good, I've got to go buy it this very second. But I do think it does get the job done. And having a ballistic nylon and a Kevlar backing really do make it nice, having kind of a different texture to hold the phone, especially amidst the sea of faux leather and this cheap plastic and aluminum. It is kind of nice to have a different texture in the back. But moving, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I wonder how many of those design decisions, as far as the aesthetic goes, are to keep it in line with their Droid series, so that it doesn't seem like it's too much of a departure from that Droid line. Has there been a Droid line, and this might segue into UI. I don't know if this topic is better there or with regard to the hardware, but the capacitive buttons. Has there ever been a Droid that didn't have the capacitive buttons?
Yes, the Razer HD had the on-screen nav bar, but I think that's the only one.
So yeah, it's a pretty like you said, like kind of a tame design with the way they look, and I still don't understand why Motorola decided to use those capacitive buttons, even if it has been something that they've been using in the past. I mean, it makes no sense, especially when we're like this close to a Lollipop update, to have capacitive buttons on the smartphone. Now, granted, there is the cool feature where we talked about this in live show. You can swipe up and still get Google Now. But even at that, when we're probably maybe a couple months away if Verizon doesn't completely screw up the update for Lollipop, we're that close to Lollipop. So, I mean, I still can't wrap my head around why we've got capacitive buttons in November of 2014 on a smartphone. But that is neither here nor there. Another.
Well, it's not. It's not even just that though. It's the fact that what they've. My buddy John told me, and he brought this up, and I didn't even think about it until he did, because Lollipop's not out for the general population yet. But not only did they put capacitive buttons on a device right before Lollipop came out, they built in the obsolescence of the device by putting the Kit Kat ice cream sandwich, Jelly Bean capacitive buttons on it. So, like, literally, they're releasing it. The phone dropped 1 week before a Lollipop updates start hitting phones, and you've got the old version of the buttons on this device instead of just going ahead and saying, well, Lollipop's around the corner. Let's just make the phone with the correct buttons, because that's going to be Lollipop. I'm sure will be the version of the operating system that's on this device for the longest.
Yeah. So kind of interesting design choices we have there. But I know one thing that Tony had a few comments on when we were testing this phone is actually the screen size. It's a 5.2-inch screen, and I mean, with phones now, we saw the Nexus 6, which I still never get used to saying, 5.9 6-inch screen. We've got the Samsung Galaxy Note 4, which I believe has a 5.7-inch display. So, I mean, a 5.2-inch screen, I mean, we're not talking about anything drastically smaller from what the market standard has been recently. But I know, Tony, you've got some opinions on this. Just kind of how the difference is a 5.2-inch screen coming from something with a larger 5.5-inch display.
When I got my first 5.5-inch phone, the Blue Life Pure XL, I thought, this is too big and I'm not going to want to use a phone that's this large. But I've come to accept the fact that most devices with flagship level hardware are going to keep getting bigger until we reach that kind of just the largest size that people are going to buy, which I think the Note series is pushing, and that's why we didn't see an increase in screen size this year for the Note 3, from the Note 3 to the Note 4. But I always thought if I could find a phone that had the 4.7-inch or 5-inch display that packed all the hardware in that the new flagship level devices like the Notes and the the Galaxy S5s and those had, I would want that device with a smaller screen just for the fact that it fits in my hand better, it fits in my I haven't had a problem with any of the devices I've used fitting in my pocket, no matter how large the screen. But just in general, it's easier to use. But now that I've come back from using a device with a 5. Well, actually, right now, I'll just say this. Right now I have the Note 4 and the Droid Turbo for review. The Note 4 has the 5.7-inch screen, which is actually slightly larger than I'm used to. So I am kind of touching the screen with the meat of my hand there when I try to reach the opposite corner. But in general, I want to pick the Note 4 up, even though the Note 4 has TouchWiz on it versus a relatively stock Android experience. I find myself reaching for the Note 4 to take out and use for the day rather than the Droid Turbo, just because the Droid Turbo has that smaller screen. I've come to appreciate that extra screen real estate so much. So to me, 5.2-inch, what they did with it is they said, how big is the M8 screen, how big is the Galaxy S5 screen, how big are the actual normal line flagships, like non-Note series flagships right now, and let's make it the same size. Or it may have been influenced by the fact that their Moto X is a 5.2 this year. I don't know. But either way, think that I'm going to go for a bigger phone. It's completely... it's completely a opinion thing. If you can use the smaller screen, then great. But to me, I'm one of those people. If I had started using a Galaxy Note a long time ago, I probably would still be on a Galaxy Note series device for my personal phone, just because I appreciate that extra screen real estate in the end, rather than having a device I can easily use with one hand.
What about you, Aaron? How do you feel about the 5.2-inch screen size?
They did, with using the capacitive buttons, they did kind of it's kind of a bob and weave to where they can eke out what feels like a little more screen real estate, because if it was a 5.2-inch screen and then you had to save room for the on-screen buttons, it would feel even more cramped. And so that is one good thing, I suppose. And looking, my daily driver right now is the G3, and I was comparing them, physically, ahead of the show, and I really think, like Tony, I'm going to reach for the device that has the bigger screen on it. But as you mentioned, it is a personal preference, and I've got a lot of people asking me, what phone should I get? Do I need to look at the Turbo? Do I need to look at the Nexus 6? And it really boils down for me to, and maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, to screen size. And if you're the kind of person who thinks that the Note series and the 6-inch, approaching 6-inch phones are too big for you, then this is the perfect fallback device. This is absolutely the next best recommendation for somebody who doesn't quite want something so big.
Right, yeah, I gotta agree with Aaron there too, because I know I also, I'll make 3 for 3 here, prefer the larger size smartphones. Like I've got the OnePlus One, that's got a 5.5-inch display, but even if you're talking 0.3 inches of a difference, it still makes quite a big difference in regards to what you can do on the phone and just your personal preference. But then again, it's going to come down to what you do prefer with the smartphones. So I know all of us here, it seems like if we had the choice between the Nexus 6 and the Droid Turbo, we'd probably go for the Nexus 6 or whatever had the biggest display. But I do know that a lot of people I know, they do like having something they can still pretty much hold in one hand, because I've got not too large a hands, and I can still pretty much easily reach all 4 corners of the screen in one hand. So it is nice still to get a phone where you can access all the phone pretty manageably in one hand. Personally, I probably would opt for something with a bit bigger display, but it is nice to have that variation in the market where, yeah, most of the market is moving towards these larger smartphones, but we're still seeing phones and ones that have some of the best specifications we've seen so far in a smartphone still have a smaller display for those people that aren't ready to hop on the 5.5-inch or the 6-inch bandwagon just yet.
And that, to me, that's been one of my gripes with the cell phone industry for a while, is that they're not for instance, my sister, I had to put her in a Windows phone recently just because it's the only device that worked well as a smartphone. Like, small and budget Android phones, to me, haven't been working well for a long time. I've tried many of them, and I just don't care for the way they work. And if they do work well, they've probably got a larger screen. She wanted a 4-inch, or actually she wanted something that was smaller than a 4-inch screen. Her last device, I've got it sitting right here, her last device was this. This is the Desire 210 or something. So this is a tiny little thing with a 2.8-inch screen. But you can't use those as a daily phone anymore because the specifications just aren't high enough to run even the current set of Google apps. So to me, I'm glad that they're keeping a diverse market for screen sizes and having a full, I mean, nobody can argue this is a flagship phone. It's got the highest end of pretty much everything that's available right now and a bigger battery than I'm pretty sure any other smartphone on the market at the moment. So it is definitely awesome that they're keeping a diverse market and not just saying, oh yeah, well, the battery's bigger, the processor's faster, and it's got more RAM, so the screen's got to be bigger too, because that's the way it did feel for a long time. I mean, we were inching up a third of an inch at a time for the Galaxy S series. Same with the Galaxy Note series.
Yeah, I do want to say the actual smartphone that, at least in my knowledge, available on the market is actually the Huawei Ascend Mate 2 4G, and that's got a 4,050 milliamp hour battery. But I mean, that's, again, Huawei isn't that big here in the States. So when you're talking actual phones that people go into a Verizon store, AT&T store, something they're going to look for a phone, the Droid Turbo is definitely the phone that has the biggest battery that's most widely available to everyone out there. And especially one more thing about the size, Motorola really kind of, I think they played this smart, because they're manufacturing the Nexus 6, which has a 6-inch display, and they're going to market towards those people like us who do prefer those bigger screen sizes. But they also have the Moto X and now the Droid Turbo, which have 5.2-inch display sizes. So they really, I think, played this smart with having two phones that have more kind of compact and manageable screen sizes and form factors. But they've also got the pretty much killer phablet out on the market. So they're getting to both markets with probably some of the best smartphones I honestly think we've seen so far this year. So on their end, I kind of have to give them a pat on the back, even though I would have preferred this to be a bigger screen size. I think they played it perfectly with the way they handled this and the Moto X.
I think they're batting 3 for 3 with those three devices. I think those are all very, very solid units.
Yeah, so I think we covered just about everything in regards to hardware, unless there was any final thoughts on that you guys wanted to bring up. All right, well, we're going to move on to software then. So the Droid Turbo is running Android version 4.4.4 KitKat, which as of now is kind of the latest version of Android that's really available out there and is the latest build of KitKat. We're hoping for an update to Lollipop hopefully within the next month or two. But as of right now, the Droid Turbo is running a very stock version of Android. This is not the Google Now launcher, which I was actually kind of surprised to see, it's actually launcher 3, so there's no Google Now to your leftmost home screen. But this is pretty much what Google Now looks like, except with that search panel on the side, which I always love to see because I've never been the biggest fan of skinned Android now, with the exception of maybe HTC Sense here and there, but I do prefer the kind of stock vanilla feel of Android. So I really did like that, but what's awesome about the Moto X is, or the Moto Droid Turbo, is that just like the Moto X from this year, it comes bundled with the Moto App, which pretty much bundles Assist, Active Display, and the touchless control right on the phone. So you guys have had a week or two with the phone. What do you think about the way Motorola handled the software side of things?
Well, I'll start here. This is my first Motorola Android device that I've used for my personal device ever, I think, actually. And I haven't used a Moto X, and that's when Active Display was born. But I tried out Active Display on this, and I have to say it annoyed me. At first I thought it was a neat idea, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna like this. But the more I, moved around the phone, and it would turn on all the time, especially like I mentioned on our show, I have it. If I have it sitting in my bed next to my head charging. And I move, or my pillow moves around it, and the screen turns on. Even that little bit on the display is enough to light up, the room and cause a little bit, not light up the room, but you know what I mean. It causes disturbance for me. So I actually end up turning Active Display off. And what I can say is that after turning Active Display off and the always listening, I put those things off, and I actually am getting really good battery life. It's been off the charger now for 15 and a half hours. And I'm at 62%, just under 3 hours of screen on time. So I am getting good battery life, at least more towards what I would expect from a 3900 milliamp hour battery now that I've turned Motorola's editions off. So I'm not a big fan of the Motorola editions, but I only was able to find a use case for listening a hot word one time, which it was neat. It felt cool to be able to do it that one time, but I would not sacrifice hours of battery life every day for that chance that maybe I won't have to pick up my phone one time during the day to get something done.
That's fair. I had a Moto X here that I reviewed immediately prior to getting the Turbo, and I also used the original Moto X, here earlier this summer when I was in my search to find the best phone, and I don't dislike features. I tell you what I do like is I find myself waving in front of the sensors to wake the phone up, and I don't know if I like that more or the double tap that we'll get to on the G3, but I do find that useful. If I was going to be a long-term owner of this device, I probably would work more to become accustomed to the custom launch phrase and the always listening mode and all of that stuff. I don't find myself using that a whole heck of a lot, but I continue to be excited about the actual beneficial additions that Motorola is adding to its phones. Coming straight from the factory. I do see them as adding value, whereas I see most of the other manufacturers taking away value.
Yeah, absolutely, because, most of the times if we have software features included on a phone, take Samsung, for example, who throws in pretty much every software feature imaginable to the human mind into a phone, and while some of them are cool, especially multi-window, which still remains probably one of the best ways to multitask on Android, you do sacrifice it for a god-awful looking skin on Android. So I really like how Motorola handled it here because, like I showed earlier, this is about as stock to Android as you're going to get aside from that very Droid-looking clock circle widget right there. But what is nice is that I had the original Moto X from 2013, and it had the touchless control, the active display, the Motorola Assist, but they were all kind of in their own applications or in the settings. So I really do think Motorola did a nice job bundling it all into that single Moto application right there. Because if you go there, you've got all your settings for Assist, your actions where you can wave your hand over the sensors to activate the display, voice, all those stuff. So it's much more organized in here and feels like the features, although they are still relatively the same, they feel a lot more matured here. And the first thing when you open up the Moto app, it takes you to this very minimal looking display right here where you can go ahead and tap on the microphone to start the voice command. As for the features themselves, though, I'm a big fan of Motorola Assist. A few of the things on there, if you're home, you can say your home location. It'll read out your notifications to you when you're at your house. When you're driving, it'll actually sense when your phone is moving in a car. So if you get a text message or a phone call or something, you can reply with your voice, which I'm a big fan of having that, especially for kind of safety things with being a teenage driver. There's always that urge there to pick up the phone, so it's nice having the phone read it to you, so you can just kind of like say off a quick reply and just be done with it. As for active display, I was always a big fan of this with the Moto X from 2013, and I personally really do like the addition of being able to kind of wave your hand over the display and seeing the time, because I know I'll be working on my computer or something and just kind of waving my hand over the phone to the other part of the desk and being able to kind of see right there on the active display if I've got, oh no, I've got 2 emails, I've got some people messaging me on Facebook, I've got a hangout message here or there. Personally, I mean, I kind of always did like having the double tap to wake, and I went to get this phone for the first time, like, I'm double tapping to wake, but the phone's not turning on. So that kind of annoyed me at first, but I am getting really used to the active display just kind of waving the hand over and saying, oh, you know, I've got so-and-so notifications here. So I really do like that. I was a big fan of that on the Moto X from 2013. One thing, though, if you do have an Android Wear smartwatch, it does kind of destroy the purpose. You kind of got to pick between one or the other, because either you've got your Moto X display popping up every time you get a notification, or you've got your Android Wear smartwatch, which I don't have on right now. But as Tony was kind of saying earlier, with him getting better battery life when he turned those features off, while that is true, we kind of touched on this in our What's Brewing show this past Friday, that's not really right on Motorola's part. I mean, yes, you can get better battery life if you turn off these software features, but if Verizon is advertising 48 hours of battery life out of the box, you kind of should be able to do that without having to turn off like the big major software features on here. So, I mean, I wish they kind of maybe optimized that a bit better for the phone. Touchless control, I mean, I kind of use it just because I think it's cool to say, hey, Mobile Cup of Joe, and then have the phone turn on like that to do a voice command. So I probably wouldn't use that too much, and I really haven't, but I really do like active display. And just having stock Android with some software additions is probably one of the best ways, and probably Motorola is one of the best OEMs who is leaving Android to what it is, but still throwing in their applications and their features into one single app, because it's organized. You still have Android how we like it, where it's stock and clean, but you have the inclusions from Motorola. So it's kind of the best of both worlds there, getting actual practical and pretty much useful software features, but still kind of having Android how we know it and how we like it.
And really, if you take the Google Now launcher that you referenced and you install that on the Moto X and the Droid Turbo, I really don't know what difference there is in the software outside of just a couple of apps that Moto added in. And on the Turbo, I think we have Droid Zap, whatever that is, and there's really not a whole lot of difference between that experience and what you're going to find on a Nexus device.
Yeah, so did you try, Aaron, when you had the Moto X or the Droid Turbo, did you turn off those software features and you're testing out the battery life, or did you keep those on when you're using it?
I did not turn those off. I didn't think to. I think I've still got it for another day or two. I'm still working on my review, but I might have to see if I get better battery life, because my real-world tests, of course I'm hard on a phone anyway, but it's let's just say it's not 48 hours.
Yeah. So that actually kind of segues us into the next part of this. The battery life on it, Verizon is claiming the phone gets 48 hours of total usage time. And I'll let either you, Tony, or Aaron kind of lead this off first. Have those claims been accurate, or are we just kind of scratching our heads wondering where Verizon got those numbers from?
Go ahead, Tony.
Well, I think my thing is I've tested it. When I get a phone, the first thing I do, after, now mind you, I had a really negative post the first night, but I did preface it saying this is the 50% that came on the phone charge, so I did kill that rather quickly. But it was much better when I had fully drained it, fully charged it, and it's even better the next time I had fully drained it and charged it. But what I do when I first start testing a phone is I will start playing games on it, I'll start watching Netflix on it, I'll start listening to music, and I'm going to get as much screen on time out of the device as possible. So that's for me, because I think, I write for AndroidGuys.com, so we have a mixed audience of techies and everyday folks who just want to find the review. So to me, the techies are going to want to know how much can I hammer on this phone and it still last. Which I'm a very critical person when it comes to that, because my personal device gets like 9 hours top of screen on time in the day before dying. So when I saw that this device is only getting 5 to 6 hours of screen on time, that was a little disappointing, especially with their claims. With one, their claims that this device should get amazing battery life, and two, knowing how much larger the battery on this is than my personal phone. So that was kind of a letdown for me. But yeah, I think yes, it could get 48 hours if you use. I mean, like if I let my grandpa use it and it was his first smartphone, he would definitely get 48 hours out of it, because you'd see that there's probably 30 to 45 minutes of screen on time during the day, if that, if he's using it to even check emails or browse the web. But if he's just using it to answer phone calls and make phone calls, then yeah, you're going to be able to squeeze 48 hours out of the battery. But even so, the thing doesn't stand by all that well. So I would expect at least to have like killer standby times, but it doesn't. It doesn't try to kill processes in the background. There's nothing special about it's doing to get battery life over any other devices. And when I have the Note 4, which is getting identical, and I mean identical battery life to this device, and with a much smaller battery, then I really feel like and a much larger screen, I really feel like they dropped the ball on the battery for it.
There's a big difference between battery life and battery capacity, and this is by far and away the best capacity that we've seen on any major phone. But the battery life doesn't necessarily map up to what you would expect from a device with that capacity. I've got some screenshots of the most screen on time I had. I got over 8 hours, 8.5 hours screen on with it on a day that I was 15 hours off charger from full to dead. And if on average, that's probably what I would be looking at is 15 to 17. The first couple of days you're using it all the time, and I would be using it a lot more than I would on a normal day. But with my situation where I'm kind of on the fringe of Verizon service, it definitely reacts to the amount of coverage that you have. And so when I'm sitting here at my desk in full 4G coverage, and sitting it off to the side, I did get over a day one time off charger. Overnight and in the better part of an afternoon where it was just sitting on my desk and I was on the computer and typing away and not really using it a whole heck of a lot. 2 hours of screen on time and you get a day off the charger, but that's not advertising for sure. And then when I drive 10 miles to the east and my coverage drops off to where maybe a bar or two of 3G, that looking at that battery chart, it really starts to nosedive in a hurry.
Yeah, and I took some quick screenshots of the battery life just so we can kind of show them. Now, this was a day where I was in the car and we were going to Indiana, and I was just kind of using the phone through the car ride. And when I was at 17% remaining, I was looking at about 13 hours, a little over 13 hours of battery life total. You can see screen on time is obviously taking up the biggest chunk there, and then cell standby, Android system, Android OS, Google Plus, Messenger. So really nothing too intensive, pretty much just checking Facebook, Google Plus, and messaging people throughout the day. And this was just barely over 4 hours of screen on time. Now, given the fact that yes, I was probably using the phone a bit more heavily than I would be if I was just staying at the house and just using it off and on to reply to the quick email here or there. But when we're talking about a 3,900 milliamp hour battery, even if I am using the phone pretty heavily, I should be able to get through more battery life than just 13 hours with 4 hours of screen on time. And I actually yesterday wasn't able to make it through a full day, and that was with maybe a teeny bit more usage, but pretty much the same, just maybe Riptide GP2 here or there, and then just Google Plus checking inbox throughout the day. But I wasn't able to make it past probably 10:30 or 11 o'clock, so I haven't had the best time with the battery life. Now, granted, in the grand scheme of things, this is still a really good battery, but compared to what Verizon is advertising to be with 48 hours, yeah, like Tony said, that's technically possible if you're using it for really just a phone. But I don't really think it's fair on Verizon's part to be saying, like, Droid Turbo, yeah, you're going to get 48 hours of battery life, and then for most users, you're going to probably be able to make it through maybe a little over a day if you're lucky.
And let's re-underscore the fact that we are power users, I would like to think, and that we're coming off pretty overly critical on a battery that for me is light years ahead of any other stock battery that I have had on a phone. I've never had a phone that I've been able to sleep after for more than 6 hours ever, period. And this thing is getting 15 hours. It's still not a full day for me when I get up early and come home late, but it's still the best stock battery experience I've ever seen for me.
And I should say that too. I should say that too, because like when I'm being critical of battery life, it's coming from my OnePlus One, which is not a device you can go to Walmart or your Verizon store or your whatever carrier store and buy. So and it is a device with custom. It is the stock firmware for the phone, but it is a custom firmware that is built and designed to get the most out of everything about your phone as far as customization, everything down from customization to battery. So I am being extremely critical, but I'm also being critical of a phone where this is the kind of operating system I would have installed on any other phone I own. So I'm going to be trying to get the most out of the device. So when it comes, yeah, you're right. When it comes to power users, it's not up to snuff for their claims. That's the main thing. I think it's just not up to snuff they're claiming. But when it comes to absolutely anyone else on the planet, don't get us wrong. This is a fantastic phone with fantastic battery life.
Yeah, I know. We see the claims, and I know I gotta always kind of put myself in the mind of like the normal consumer. They're not going to be using the phone for 4 hours of screen on time, like I know most of us do, probably sometimes even more. So if it's just you're going to get a new contract on Verizon, you're going to upgrade your line, and you are a pretty average user of your phone, the battery life, like Tony and Aaron said, is phenomenal and is still some of the best you're going to find. But like we also said, if you're using your phone constantly throughout the day, 48 hours is just not realistic. You just kind of have to look at your usage scenarios, what they kind of are on a daily basis, and then just kind of see in your mind if those 48 hours are going to be something that's going to be plausible for you to actually get out of the phone. So another big thing for the Droid Turbo is actually, well, Motorola as a company has never been that well known for having good cameras on their smartphones, but the Droid Turbo does have a 21 megapixel rear-facing camera, and you can see right there it's flanked by LED flashes on either side with a pretty standard 2 megapixel front-facing camera up front. And I know I was actually pretty impressed with the photos and videos I was able to take. So were you guys able to get good-looking shots with the Turbo?
I got a few. I'll actually let me see. Well, I don't know. Screen sharing on this wouldn't do justice to the photos. But I got a few that I really enjoyed. My issue is Motorola and HTC have a similar quality in almost all the photos that I get that I feel like are really good photos. When I zoom in, even on a 21 megapixel shot, when I zoom in, I get this really weird grainy look, almost like some kind of oil painting filter has been applied through a program or something. And I don't know if it's something they're doing to try to overcorrect, to try to make it look better than it is, or like a, kind of, it's almost like an anti, what's the, not HD, what's
HD.
that? What's that now?
HDR?
Yes, it's like an anti-HDR. That's what it feels like when I look at it, when I zoom in and I see that. But the fact is, it does take good photos unless you're zooming way in on them. In what I've seen, and the front camera, I think it takes pretty good photos too. And as far as video chatting is concerned, using the front camera, totally usable.
Yeah, I know. I don't really take. I like to think I don't take too many selfies with my phones, but the front-facing camera, I mean, 2 megapixels, it's pretty basic. I would have wished the lens was a bit more wide because you can't fit too much into the frame with it. But I mean, just for a Snapchat or something, whatever it is you want to do with it, it's gonna be fine for that. The camera, though, I haven't had the opportunity to use the camera on the Moto X from this year or the Nexus 6 for that matter. But this is probably the best camera I've ever used on a Motorola smartphone. And with 21 megapixels, you can zoom in quite a bit, but as Tony said, they don't look that great. But if you're just buying this thing and you're going to take pictures and just upload them to Instagram or Facebook or something, it's going to be perfectly fine for that. And the camera software on here is actually very minimal. I'm not sure if it's going to show up too well, but pretty much you just have the viewfinder here with some options for recording and switching to the front-facing camera. And then if you swipe over, you just have kind of a bar right here which you can slide through for adjusting it, because by default 16:9 aspect ratio is going to get you 15.5 megapixel images, but you have to switch to the 21 megapixel setting for the 4:3 aspect ratio. But we're looking at the camera and the way the interface is laid out, and one of my favorite features, I actually forgot to mention, being able to twist the phone a couple times in the hand to open the camera app is still the best way I've seen on a smartphone to get into the camera right away, and probably the fastest way too. So really, if you're just kind of whipping it out of your pocket, shaking your hand a couple times, and snapping a picture. For me myself, it's probably one of the best phones I've seen where it takes the best pictures to just kind of take it out and snap a button to get a picture. So I've really been impressed with it, and video quality too. So I really don't have anything too much to complain about it, even for Motorola, a company that's never been that well known for their cameras on their phones. Personally, I was actually pretty impressed with the quality I was able to get out of this thing.
I had the Moto X when my second son was born here about a month ago, and took a lot of pictures, and it was okay, but it sure wasn't awesome pictures like I think I get out of my G3, with that optical image stabilization. The camera on the Droid Turbo is definitely better than the Moto X, which has a 13 megapixel shooter on it. I don't think it's 21 over 13 times better. I don't think it's that much better to I really think that there might be some megapixels that have gone not as well purposed as maybe they could have been. I got to take the Turbo out on Halloween and got a lot of play in the low light and playing around with flash on pretty large areas outdoors, and it's good. It's definitely probably the best flash I've seen on any device that I've seen so far. I was disappointed in the speed of the shots. Going from the desktop, taking your risk a couple of times, and trying to get a picture off real quick in auto settings. It seems like it takes forever for me. Now the result is generally pretty good, and outside looking at full daylight, fall leaves, trees, those kind of shots, it's gorgeous. It's absolutely great. But there are a couple of little things. The speed is probably the biggest criticism I have of the camera, but it is a great camera.
See, and my thing with the camera, my only real beef with the camera is the interface. I can't stand the interface. Now, the one thing I do like about the interface that you can, if you're taking it, like if say I'm taking a selfie with my wife or something to post online, I usually would opt to use the rear camera just because it's better, and I'm gonna want the higher quality image for that. So turning it around and just tapping anywhere on the screen and knowing you're getting a picture is awesome, and not having to like fumble around and find the button with your finger. That's nice, but other than that, I can't stand the minimal camera interface. I want to see options. I want to have options, and part of the reason I don't like the interface is because there's not enough options to change things. There's just not enough options to get in and get your hands dirty and switch options as you need them. So I'm not that happy with Motorola's interface, but that's not a complaint with the Turbo themselves, with the Turbo itself.
And that's not necessarily just Motorola's interface. Doesn't the new Google camera that they put in the Play Store have that same scroll wheel interface that touch anywhere to take a picture? Like, I think that's the Google stock KitKat.
Oh no. The new the Google camera, you can actually download it on any phone.
I know, and
the camera has. Let's see. I think I do have it on here. Let me pull it up here.
And that it was that interface that caused me to go back to the stock picture or stock camera app on my G3.
So on the Google camera, you can just pull out from the side and get all your stuff there. So it is still minimal compared to like Samsung's stuff, but where for me, my favorite camera application on a device was the camera app on the. I do like the CM11S camera on the OnePlus, but I really liked the camera application that I had on my Blue Life Pure XL. But that was the absolute highest quality cameras, front and back, I've ever used on a device. It was a 16 megapixel rear shooter and an 8 megapixel front facing camera, and it had the most incredible options you've ever seen and the most in-depth tweaks that I've ever seen on a cell phone for a camera. It was very impressive.
Well, we're talking about quality and displays and all that stuff. Another thing I want to touch on real quick for the Droid Turbo itself, before we get to a little comparison here. 5.2-inch display we talked about a lot earlier, but one thing we didn't mention, I don't think we did at least, this is a Quad HD display with a capital Q, 2560 by 1440, and that brings in 493 pixels per inch or somewhere around there. So you definitely have a lot of pixels being pushed around on this 5.2-inch display. Now, me personally, I am content with 1920 by 1080p, which is pretty much what we're seeing on most smartphones, what we've been seeing for a couple years now. Now, if I did put this next side by side with my OnePlus One, and I put my nose like right to the screen, yeah, I could see that text on here is a bit crisper, and colors are a bit brighter and more saturated due to the fact that this is a Super AMOLED panel. But for me personally, I really don't see the need of Quad HD displays just yet. Now, the Snapdragon 805 processor in here is probably awesome it's in here since we have a Quad HD display, since it's supposedly optimized to handle all those extra pixels on the display. But for me personally, though, I would have been perfectly fine with 1080p on here. I mean, yeah, it's always nice to have that extra resolution, but I mean, I just wasn't really all that impressed by what I saw on the phone's display.
I think it's overkill. You know, especially on a 5.2-inch phone. You know, I was before the show, I was comparing it with the with my Nexus 5 that I have here, looking and seeing if I could tell any difference. You know, and holding it pretty close to my face, and I honestly could not notice a difference in the screen. And it's 560, Joe, not 460 ppi.
Oh.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. And it's I don't think it's necessary. Can you imagine the battery performance that you would have if you had a standard display on this phone?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, it'd be amazing. And that's, you know, to me, when I had the G3 for review, which is its 5.5-inch display, so the exact same size as my OnePlus One, which has a 1080p, and the G3 does have the Quad HD display as well. When I had those two at 5.5 inches, I could only just barely tell a difference between the screens, and the only time I could ever see the difference was on the Leo's Fortune game icon. And it's because it's a newer game and it's made by, I don't know if it's made by some people who work for Google, but I know that Google stands by it pretty hard, and they've used it in a lot of their advertisements and stuff. They actually played it on stage at I.O. So they've actually optimized their icons and their game to work and into a full QHD mode. I don't know what you'd call that, but they've optimized it for QHD and probably even higher. But it does look slightly better on a 5.5-inch display. Now on a 5.2-inch display, I can't say that there's there'd be any difference. Now my main complaint here with the whole squeezing more pixels into smaller phones is that what is Apple has been touting for the past, since the iPhone 4S came out, the Retina display. The whole point of the Retina display is that it's got so many pixels squeezed in so tight that your eye can't tell the difference from one pixel to the next, right? You're not supposed to be able to pick out individual pixels with a Retina display. I'm sure there is a possible way to do that, but when you know that that's their whole thing, and that every iDevice that comes out now has a Retina display, and you know that now the OnePlus One, which has a 1920 by 1080p IPS display, which is the exact same, and I don't mean like the same quality, I mean it is the same exact panel sold by the same company that's in the OnePlus One on the new iPhone 6 Plus. So when you know that the iPhone 6 Plus is only running at exactly a 1080p resolution, and their whole thing they're touting is Retina, then we know that up to a 5.5-inch display, the reason they chose a 1920 by 1080p is because it falls under their Retina category. We know that up to 5.5 inches, you shouldn't be able to tell much of a difference at all. So I don't like the idea of putting it into anything smaller, especially smaller phones with smaller batteries. I think that's silly. But I can see at a 6-inch level, I think that was a good idea for the Nexus 6, because that is another thing that sets it apart from the crowd. But as far as a 5.2-inch display, come on. I mean, I have a 50-inch 720p TV, and I think that looks great. You know?
Yeah. So yeah, it looks like none of us are really too geeked about that Quad HD display. I want to go to Aaron though real quick before we run out of go too much longer here. Aaron has the LG G3, which, as we know, is probably one of the other biggest flagship smartphones so far in 2014. So, Aaron, I'll let you kind of floor here, and let us know what you think about the G3 compared to that Droid Turbo.
Honestly, I am very surprised at how much bigger the G3 feels or seems to me when I pick it up and hold it and use it than the Turbo. As you can see on the screen, physically, the physical size is 0.3 inches bigger, but the physical size really isn't a whole lot different. And it just surprises me, you know, that the G3 feels so much bigger than the Turbo. So that, again, it goes back to the Turbo feeling good in the hand. The primary difference is the screen type. You know, the G3 has the IPS display, and the Turbo the AMOLED. And my personal preference is certainly for the IPS. Now I know that comes at a power cost, but I sure like looking at an IPS display a little more than an AMOLED. For me, I'll take the camera. Honestly, the camera on the G3, because it has that optical image stabilization, in that laser focus. It's fast. It takes really good pictures. They may not be as high resolution, but at some point, especially in low light, you add megapixels and you're really just adding noise to the shot. And so I do like the camera on the G3 myself. And I honestly don't notice an appreciable speed difference. The Dragon, I believe, in the compared to the 805, they're both driving the same resolution, the same number of pixels. The first thing I did when I got the G3, read it on some forums, turn off the animations, and it's just as snappy as the Turbo is to me. It's fast enough. I think the radio performance on the Turbo might be a little bit better. I didn't get a whole lot of time, on the farm with the Turbo, so it's tough for me to tell for sure. But the amount of time that I did see, it seemed to pick up service just a little bit better than the G3. But that's pure anecdote. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if I like the double tap to wake or the wave to wake, but the biggest thing for me and the reason that I like the G3 is that it does have the removable back, which lets me slap in my 9,000 milliamp hour battery and really get 2 days of hotspot and screen on, and I cannot get less than 2 days out of a 9,000 milliamp battery on the G3. So those are the big differences. I do like the more simple interface on the Turbo for sure, and it's my desire for pure Android that has me excited about the Nexus 6 even over the Droid Turbo, is because of that pure Android experience. And so I do like that over the modifications that LG does put on, which aren't that obnoxious. It's certainly not TouchWiz, but it is enough to make all of the roundness does make that you're not on a pure Google experience. So.
Yeah, I know I wasn't able to use the G3 for too long, but did you have any thoughts on that two devices compared, Tony?
Well, see, in my opinion, now I had the T-Mobile version, which was I did notice a speed difference. Now, mind you, I didn't turn off the animations. I used it totally stock. So, but I was also coming from I was comparing directly with like the Galaxy S5 and at the time probably. Well, the OnePlus One. So that wasn't really a fair comparison because the OnePlus One you have identical specs but a lower resolution screen, so you're definitely going to see. And it's still an IPS display, so almost identical specs with the lower resolution screen. So there had to be some kind of a performance enhancement, and then it was running CyanogenMod. So again, not a fair comparison. But as far as flagships go, it was okay. I wouldn't have recommended the G3, but the camera was out of this world, compared to most devices. And when you mentioned that, I would take the G3 camera over the camera on the Droid Turbo any day because, like you said, you're adding noise to the shot. That's what I was describing there, is that you're muddying it up instead of the G3, which is kind of like the perfect balance of megapixels versus crispness, and that optical image stabilization was great. The laser autofocus was great, and every picture I took with the G3 came out clean, clear, and really, really crisp with good colors. So I just haven't seen that yet with the Turbo. I hope I do see some better pictures, but I'm more impressed with the camera on the front of the Turbo than I am on the back, because they've squeezed a lot out of a 2-megapixel sensor. But in general, as far as software goes, yeah, I prefer the software on the Turbo just because it's more closer to stock Android. But I think the G3 would probably win it for me if I had to choose between them too, just because you've got I think the biggest thing in my opinion would be the SD slot. And I don't need an SD slot on my daily phone, but I think that if I had the choice between a device that had it and the device that didn't, I'd probably choose the device that does have it, because it is such. I root in ROM, so it is such a just peace of mind knowing that I can have a whole backup there available, and I don't have to worry about accidentally erasing it off the phone.
Especially with Google allegedly fixing the whole SD card issue with Lollipop, they're supposed to be making that work again.
Yeah,
that's going to be really exciting for anyone who has a phone with an SD slot.
Well, and that's a perfect segue into one of the big points I want to make. We've said a lot of things about the battery life on this tonight, but the big thing is we can't make an accurate judgment on the battery life about this, since this phone is going to be a Lollipop phone. It was released with KitKat just because it released before Lollipop dropped. But it's going to be a Lollipop device, and with Project Volta and all the other enhancements with Lollipop that Lollipop's bringing, I think that we're going to see a real vast improvement with the battery life that this device is able to achieve. And I'm really hoping to. I really wish we could hang on to the devices at least until we got the update, but obviously they have other people to review too. So I'm really interested to hear about the battery life on this post Lollipop update. That will really make it or break it, in my opinion.
Okay, no, I'm definitely gonna try to make an attempt to get this phone back after the Lollipop update does hit, because, like Tony said, that's gonna make a huge difference for user experience with material design and for that battery performance edition there as well. So we're kind of running short on time, so just kind of final thoughts on the Droid Turbo. Just kind of wrap up this roundtable. I will go left to right, my screen anyways. So Aaron, kind of your just final thoughts and kind of wrap up opinions with Droid Turbo. Your highest points, your lowest points, and kind of just who you would recommend this phone to if someone is looking for a new smartphone.
Well, certainly the highest point is battery. You know, we harped on it the better part of this episode, this hour here. We talked more about battery than anything else. It is an amazing battery. It is not quite what they advertise, but it is huge, especially compared to pretty much any other device that I have seen. And once Lollipop hits it, I really think we're going to see some amazing battery numbers with the phone. The low points on the phone, screen size, for me, capacitive buttons. That's going to be if I had to pick one thing that I could change about it, I would get rid of the capacitive buttons, maybe make the screen, just a little bit bigger on it. I think you could do that without too much compromise. As far as who would I recommend it to, I am really excited right now. If somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm on Verizon, what phone do I get now?" It is really easy for me. I say, if you can carry a huge phone, if you like a big phone, stay away from the Note series. Get the Nexus 6. If that's too big for you, then the Droid Turbo is the absolute perfect fallback device. You are not making any compromises. You're getting a smaller screen. You're getting a bigger camera. That megapixels, it's not about the megapixels, but those still sell phones, and it's great to be able to recommend somebody that's got a huge 21 megapixel camera on it, easy to talk somebody into. So I would recommend it to anybody who does not want to carry around a 6-inch phone.
Awesome. So we'll go next to Tony here. What are your final kind of wrap up and closing thoughts for the Droid Turbo?
Well, like I said before, we're extremely skeptical. We're extremely critical of the device because we're power users, and that's our job. Our job, our job or our hobby, however you do this, is to get these devices and be extremely critical of them. But overall, the camera is good, compared to what's available right now. Basically, if you're any device at this point, we're kind of quabbling, unless it's just got really crap software or really low-end sensor, like less than 5 megapixel. You're going to get good pictures for sharing on Facebook, for sharing on Instagram, and for snapping a bunch of pictures of your kids just to have. So overall, you really can't go wrong with this phone because it's still Android, and you can still change anything about it that you want with relatively low, little product knowledge. You don't have to know how to root and ROM to change something about the phone. And I'm able to, like I said, I was able to turn off all the things I really didn't care for about the phone. So definitely a phone worth looking into. And like you said, like Aaron said, if you're not into the Nexus 6, which would be my first choice for anyone on any carrier at this point, just because I'm that big of an Android fanboy, if you want something smaller, this is definitely a contender, and it has the plus of having a better battery than most of the devices out that are going to get steady updates.
Awesome. So I'll go ahead with my kind of closing thoughts here. Throughout the whole show, like, our biggest complaints were pretty minor in the whole grand scheme of things, and that's pretty awesome with the phone. Yeah, like we talked about earlier, we were very critical on the battery life in some of the software additions with the touchless control and all that. But like Aaron mentioned earlier, if you are on Verizon Wireless right now looking to upgrade your line this holiday season, or you're coming to Big Red service, this is probably one of the best smartphones you can get right now. And I was like everyone else here has suggested, go for the Nexus 6 if you like those big-sized phones, and just because the Nexus brand is one of the best brands in Android, especially with the big push Google is putting on it this year with the whole new Nexus lineup and Android Lollipop. But I mean, this phone is probably one of my favorite Verizon exclusives I've used in quite some time, because Verizon has never really been that known to have good exclusives or kind of good early access phones. I mean, AT&T has one of the biggest catalogs here in the United States anyways for devices. So Verizon getting a flagship smartphone that's this powerful, that has the highest specs we've seen on a smartphone, 21 megapixel camera, Snapdragon 805, Quad HD display, love it or hate it, and a 3,900 milliamp hour battery. Having that all exclusive on Verizon, I think that could really bring a lot of customers over to them, because even though, like we said, maybe the 21 megapixel camera doesn't hold up to how we would think a 21 megapixel sensor should perform. Maybe for us personally, a 3,900 milliamp hour battery doesn't get us 48 hours of usage, but even just having on your advertising, a phone that's got a 21 megapixel camera, a phone that can get you 2 days of battery life, I think that's really going to help Verizon sell this phone, because really 48 hours, depending on the user, you might be able to get that, honestly, if you're kind of a light to moderate user of your smartphone. So I definitely do recommend this phone, again, coming to Verizon or upgrading your line. Aside from the Nexus 6, I'm never going to get that name right, this is an awesome phone to go with. So that's kind of our roundtable. Just kind of close out with some kind of closing plugs for everybody before we get off here. I've got my full review for this phone to I got that edited finally, and I'm going to render that and ship this back to my Verizon, because my PR guys on me, because there's a lot of people that do want to get this phone in their hands, because it is probably the most popular phone right now with Verizon, without a doubt. So I've got that. This unboxing actually still haven't got up on the channel, so unboxing and review for the Droid Turbo will be coming up very soon to the Mobile Cup of Joe YouTube channel. Aside from that, though, I don't think I've got any other smartphones right now or any new review units, as to my knowledge, coming in. So we'll work with some PR contacts, try to get some new toys in to get some more reviews up before the holiday season gets too close. So pretty much just editing and rendering my review of the Droid Turbo is what's going to be keeping me busy the next couple days. And I'm just going to go ahead left to right again. Aaron, what is going on with you? Any kind of last plugs you want to throw in real quick?
I am the community evangelist for Purple Wave Auction. I just wanted to make sure I got that in there in time. I blog about auctions and technology at Auctioneer Tech, and that's where I'll be posting my review of the Droid Turbo. And I also farm and spent the last 5 months on a wheat farm and played with a lot of different pieces of technology. And so I hope to kind of debrief and start rolling some of those reviews and discussions about some of the fun things I got to use over the summer out also at auctioneertech.com and my personal blog at Aaron Traffas.
Awesome, awesome. So we'll go to Tony McAfee, a spec sheet from What's Brewing. What's going on with you?
I really should start tonight, probably after work if I have a chance. I need to get the review for this device typed up, the Turbo. I need to type up my review for the Note 4, which I've been using the two in tandem kind of every other day, which actually has given me a good perspective, because I get to see which one I want depending on what I'm doing. So some interesting things going to come out in those reviews. And shooting a video, hopefully, of the which one is it? The Epson Moverio BT200 headset, the Android tablet headset, which is a very interesting piece of technology. So look forward to that video on Mobile Cup of Joe. And I just want to throw it out there before we get off. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you're able to get this on. You should be able to add this to a playlist on your channel as well. We're really happy to have another guy in here to talk to us and talk with us about tech for a little while. That was very fun.
Well, I sure appreciate the invite and the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, Aaron will also be joining us this Friday. I hope I will be able to join. I can't say for sure, because yesterday was my due date for my son, so I can't say for sure whether I will be here this week, but Aaron will definitely be joining for What's Brewing this week too, so look forward to that. If you're watching this if you're watching this on Friday, then be sure that you're watching at 9 p.m. Eastern Time when Aaron will be joining us for What's Brewing in technology.
Yeah, so that about does it. Like Tony said, we got What's Brewing this Friday at 9. Hopefully all three of us will be there on the show if our schedules and everything works out. So that has been Mobile Cup of Joe's roundtable of the Motorola Droid Turbo, the hottest smartphone right now on Verizon Wireless. If you guys have any additional questions for us about the phone, definitely feel free to let us know down in those comments below. Go ahead and comment on YouTube or the event page on Google+. Or reach out to us. We're on pretty much all the social media sites. So if you have any further questions, we'd love to answer them. We've had some pretty good quality time with the Droid Turbo here, so we'd love to answer your further questions for the phone. But for right now, for this roundtable, that about does it. So thank you guys so much for watching and joining us. Remember to subscribe here to the Mobile Cup of Joe YouTube channel for all your hottest tech news and reviews. And on behalf of Aaron, Tony, and Joe Martin, thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you guys in the next video. Have a good night.
We'll see you.